Rightio. So there are four possible outcomes. So the first one obviously is stay as we are, and we've already, the board and the Burwood board have already voiced their preference to stay as they are. Obviously the other option is to merge, but stay as a 1 to 6 school. Or the third option is obviously we stay as we are, but we do recapitate to a year 1 to 8, or the number 4 option obviously, which would be the biggest option, which is we merge schools and we recapitate. So there's four sort of key things that, or key outcomes that could impact on Windsor as it is today. If we were to stay as we are, Windsor remains as a self-governing school, so you'd have the same board of trustees, existing principal and existing staff. So it would pretty much be status quo. Average class size would be around 23, same teachers, same support staff. So you would see no real visible change. With the merge option with Burwood and Windsor and stay as a year 1 to 6, the indicative role would be approximately around 630, which is basically the same as we are now. We would have a new principal, and obviously, as Ellie said, the two current principals. It might be a new deal, but obviously the roles have to be advertised nationally, and obviously we would be encouraging both Neil and the Burwood principal to be applying for those roles, applying for that role. Obviously the staff from both schools would be amalgamated based on the requirement that the new school would have, and we would have a revised board that, as Ellie said, would probably consist of either a completely new board appointed by the Minister, or it could be a revised board of the two current boards.
So just following on from that, the third option that we could potentially end up with is we recapitate but no merger. So in other words, on this site we become a year 1 to 8 school. This probably would occur if Chisnellwood was forced to close, but it's not our preference at all. There is some growth, but not major due to changes to the outer zone enrolments. And if that did occur, there would obviously be a need to create technology provision within the cluster. The other schools within the cluster, the Parklands cluster, are all year 1 to 8 schools, so Windsor is, I guess, different in that sense. And within that grouping, we would need to create provision for some of the things that Chisnellwood perhaps currently offers that aren't available at the moment, so there'll be a few changes there. And the last possible outcome is that we merge and we become a year 1 to 8 school. And as you saw from the data earlier, they're projecting if that happens, we could be school roll could be approximately 800 children. So that would be on the Windsor site. So I guess one of the questions you might have is what can we do as a community to feedback about these proposals and have our points of view heard? Obviously coming along tonight is a good first step to that, because hopefully you've learned some information and had a chance to think about things. There's quite a lot of information and data that's probably been thrown at you tonight, and most of that was included in the flyer, or the key points were included in the flyer that came home, so you've got an opportunity to go and think and absorb, because I know that as a board it took us a long time to get our head around all the various bits of information and where things might lead. We're here today obviously to get your feedback in the various stations, and what we'll be moving into next is your opportunity to give us some feedback about the various options and ask any questions that you have. Also included in the flyer that you got home today were other ways that you could contribute and give us feedback. So obviously emailing or writing to the school. You have the opportunity to write or email directly the Minister of Education or your local MP if you have information or feedback that you feel is important and you want to get it straight to the source. So those are all listed in the flyer. Once we have all the feedback from the community, and we're going to have various sources between now and when we have to put our proposal in, the board will then formulate a response back to the Minister, and we need to have that document back by the 7th of December at the moment. There is some discussion about whether that date might change, but at the moment that's the date that we're working towards. So I'll hand over to Anne, who's going to talk to you about the next bit.
All right, you didn't think you could come to school and not do anything, so the next bit's the fun part, participation. We're going to do a SWOT analysis or a SWOT exercise. It's pretty much the granddaddy of data collection or getting comments and feedbacks from everybody, so if you're new to it, I'll just give you a quick explanation, and there is this model up here that you can refer to just to refresh. You'll also have a lead at each of the stations just to sort of remind you about what you're going to do and why you're going to do it. This will give everybody the opportunity to comment on each of the 4 possible options that we've just heard from around staying as we are, merging as 1 to 6, staying as we are, going 1 to 8, and then or merging 1 to 8 as well with Burwood. As you can see with the SWOT, S&W stands for strengths and weaknesses. They tend to be the internal attributes of the school, so you might be thinking about things like the human resources, the staffing, or the physical environment around the buildings and everything. And then we've got the opportunities and threats, which are things that are external to the school, attributes in the environment that we look for opportunities or threats to how our school plays out in that context. It's really important to look at opportunities and threats first, because it's helping us to understand the context for why the change is being proposed. And the other way that you might want to look at it too is looking back here. Strengths and opportunities, as you look down the grid, are things that are helpful to achieving an objective. So what would be helpful about this proposed outcome? And then on the right hand side, weaknesses and threats would be what is harmful to the proposed outcome. So what's really important about this, and we're going to get into little focus groups, is that it's about having a really open attitude to each of the proposals that you come across. And thinking about it from a really open perspective. There's some rules, got to have some rules. It's about quantity of comments and ideas and suggestions, it's not about quality, so just put it out there. Any idea is a good idea, and think the good, the bad and the ugly. I expect we might get a bit of ugly to start off with, but that's fine too, and then you might come around to thinking about some good things as well. It's also not about evaluating what anyone else has said either, so not unpacking it and saying, but how would that work, or what would this do? What's important is about getting everybody's ideas and suggestions and comments down, and you need to record them in bits of paper there. We're going to make it easy for you tonight, and just get to write it down on a little post-it note and then put it up into the various quadrants, whether you see an opportunity or a threat or a strength or a weakness. It's okay to sort of tag or combine.
Well, just a question for me. You're saying about 23 kids at the moment to one teacher. I'm just thinking, before we went into doing this, would we not need to sort of have a rough idea of the other options and choices about breakdown on class sizes? Or do you have that number?
Neil? Neil's the guru.
Yeah, we know at the moment that Windsor's 23 students on average to one teacher. I'm just saying, when you have the combined with the other different options presented, are the class sizes going to stay the same? I just thought we might need to know that before we go to the rules.
Sure. They probably would stay the same. Yeah. The ministry is required to fund us per child, so that shouldn't change. As I think Ellie alluded to, the only difference would be going forward if we still had a large number of out-of-zone children, and we as a board have already said that they're prepared to take siblings, then the risk or the challenge is that the board is then required to find the space. That could impact on class size.
Sure.
So we have already purposely built in for that in the last few years, so we actually have more classrooms than we need. But class sizes could change anyway, so I wouldn't guarantee that just a merger could change the class size. They could change for a number of reasons.
Another question with regards to the option 4 and option 3, Chismelwood, we have like year 1 to 8 for Chismelwood, and there's that technology provision at intermediate. So who would they take all the equipment from Chismelwood, bring it over here, and we have those provisions, or does the school have to find extra resources to provide that?
Unfortunately, what they've done in amongst this, and Tom might have alluded to it, is the learning cluster networks that they're setting up. So there's a lot of pressure on most schools in Christchurch at the moment to come up with a learning cluster plan by the 7th of December. We've had our timeline extended because we've got a merger and a relocation and another thing happening with our boundaries. What the ministry is saying is, let's say for example that they change this to 1 to 8, they then want the 4 schools or 5 schools to come up with some innovative ways to meet the needs of the children. So they might say, you could decide that Windsor School is going to do the food technology, you might decide that Queen's Park is going to do the materials technology, or you could come up with a totally different plan where the technology actually goes to the schools. They're going to leave it up to the schools to decide that. They are required to fund it, and they're required to provide spaces for it and teaching components for it. But it's quite a challenge going forward for us to figure that out. And they've done quite a bit of, here you go, you figure it out, in amongst all of the stuff that we've been dealing with since the outset.
And the other thing that came up to me, I know you were saying that projected roles are going to be the same except if you merge with the intermediate. I just thought, wow, we've got 1,000 children currently.
At Burwood. So Burwood's got 289 at the moment. Of those, 130 are in zone. They have already said to us that it's very unlikely that all of their children will come here. A lot of their children are just staying there, even though the families have moved out, because they wanted to finish their children's education in the school they enrolled them in. That'll be a factor to start with. The ministry has said that there's 6% still live in a red zone. They're not going to stay there. They're predicting that the whole area, regardless of that, once all that is finished, is going to have a drop, not increase. So that's why they've gone for the date 2016 to allow some of those things. If we merged tomorrow, there'd be a bump and then it'd settle down. I think that's why they're suggesting 2016.
What about those outer zoners? Like Windsor wouldn't be taking outer zoners, would they?
The board's already decided from this day forward we're not taking any more out of zone. And we haven't, ours says 22%, that isn't because the board have taken 22% of our roll from out of zone. That simply means that when the ministry did their dot plot graph the other day, 22% of our families are living out of our zone. Now a lot of them started in zone and moved, a lot of them are moved because of the earthquake, so the numbers are a bit challenging that way, but the bottom line is if 22% are living out of zone, they're not going to be replaced because they're out of zone. So those children, once they go, that'll end that bit of growth. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, and that's why at the outset when we looked at this, we thought, gosh, we're talking about a school of 1,000, and that's why it was quite frustrating to say the least, and that's without any swear words, that we went through the holidays, we tried to get data, tried to get information, researched about Preston's, all this sort of stuff, and on the last Friday of the holidays at Harbour State Night, they ring me up and say, now we've got the data for you. If we'd had that data at the outset, we would have said to the community, here's what the proposal is and here's what the numbers look like. So that's been a very frustrating component for us as we work through it.
Just so you know, there is opportunity. You can see the wee parking signs on each station there. You can write your questions up there if they're unresolved when we go around to our focus group. So,
Do those and then we'll do it.
Yeah, just one other thing as well. That was just to wake you up. It's really easy to think about the negative because we've spent weeks thinking about these. But we also need to think about the positives. If this is going to happen, then we've actually got an opportunity to have input on what that means. And so if you think about all the hats you can wear, put on your really positive hat as well, and you say, if this is going to happen, what do we actually want for a school? So there's a couple of sheets of paper at the front here. As you're wandering around, or maybe later when you're having a drink, can I write out what you'd want if you were starting a school from scratch and you could revision what the new school is going to look like on this site? Then just jot down what you'd like to see. You know, do you want a swimming pool? Do you want to be the technology centre? Do we want to have a bilingual unit? It could be anything. Just jot it down there because it helps us actually build up that picture for the future.